Craft brewers are always pushing the boundaries of what's possible in the brewing industry, both in terms of technology and the tastes they provide. Rather than reaching new heights, 3 Argentinian breweries attempted to age their latest beer aboard a sunken ship on the ocean floor. What happens next? Well, there's a reason why we call this channel Capers and Cocktails. Welcome to Capers and Cocktails, a true crime podcast that doesn't take itself too seriously and gives you something to enjoy while you listen. The following content may be disturbing to some. Discretion is advised. If you're enjoying one of our themed cocktails, ensure you're of legal drinking age and have fun, but drink responsibly. Off the coast of Mar del Plata, a seaside resort town in Argentina, a Soviet-era ship sank in 2014. The Chronometer, a steel Russian fishing vessel that was 84.7 meters long and 14 meters wide, had actually been abandoned at a Mar del Plata floating dock sometime before 2005 and had been left to rust. In 2014, the boat that had developed a 30-degree list on its port side, it was like leaning in the water, was pulled out by 2 tugboats and sunk on purpose to become a diving attraction. The Chronometer found its final resting place 66 feet below the surface of the clear blue water, about 5 miles from Mar del Plata. I actually found a pretty cool video of this process that I'll link in the description box if you want to watch. Over the years that followed, the ship lived up to its new purpose, becoming a popular spot for recreational diving. I also would like to dive around a shipwreck, so I can completely relate. And after the divers were finished with their exploring, they may have decided to relax at a local bar and enjoy some ocean water. Well, in the form of the ocean water cocktail, that is. The ocean water cocktail was inspired by the very popular drink at America's Drive-In, not Dive-In. Get it? Sorry. Sonic. Cocktail enthusiasts and amateur mixologists have adapted the drink to enjoy when you're 21 plus and done with a long day of diving in and out of a Soviet-era ship. To prepare the cocktail, add 2 parts coconut water, 2 parts pineapple juice, 2 parts blue Curacao, and 1 part coconut rum into a cocktail glass with ice. Stir to combine and garnish with a cherry. Sonic would definitely approve of that cherry. For the mocktail, combine 2 parts coconut water, 2 parts pineapple juice, 2 parts orange juice, and 1 part rum syrup into a cocktail glass with ice. Add a few drops of blue food coloring if you want. You don't have to, but if you do, it will match the colors. Stir to combine and add that very necessary cherry. In 2018, 49-year-old Carlos Breas, who ran the Thalassa Diving School and had probably had his fair share of dives around the Chronometer, read a new article and had a stroke of genius. The article was about beer that was being aged underwater. Yes, beer that is barreled up, sunk into a depth of water, and left to age for the perfect amount of time. If this is the first time you're hearing of this, well, me too. But apparently it's it's unusual, but not super unusual. There are breweries doing it in South Africa and America, among other places. But does it make any difference if you leave it to age down there? According to brewery owner Rob Dokachi, it does. Why? Well, according to him, quote, "We think it has something to do with the fluctuating temperature of the water. The pressure and the slight rocking motion from the current also may be a factor. It really is magic," end quote. And Carlos wanted some of that magic. So he pitched the idea to a friend and part owner of the Heller Brewery, 37-year-old Eduardo Ricardo. The word started to spread around the beer community in Mar del Plata, and 2 other breweries signed on, and they all started working to make the dream a reality. And something was interesting about this particular idea. Most of the time people were doing this, the beer was being aged at a shallower depth of water. This experiment would be testing the aging of the beer at a much lower depth and higher pressure. People were excited in particular because, as another brewery owner, Juan Pablo Vincent, said, quote, "No one had ever done it before," end quote. The brewers chose a strong dark ale with an alcohol level of somewhere between 11 and 12%. Very strong. They worked for over a year to get the necessary permits. They were slowed down somewhat by the global panini. Okay, y'all. The word brewer, I'm going to try it. We're going to go with it. On November 22nd, 2020, the brewers filled 7 barrels with 185 gallons of beer. And with the help of Carlos's divers, they put the barrels into a steel cage and then brought the beer 66 feet down to the ocean floor. They secured the steel cages to the outside of the chronometer on the bow. The entire operation took place under the supervision of the Argentinian Navy. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see that it was quite the operation. The plan was to let the beer age for 2 months and then blend it with another beer to make a hybrid batch of a custom brew. It would be about 2,000 bottles worth of the special ocean beer. The group planned to donate proceeds from the sales to a local natural science museum. The diving instructors and brewery owners took multiple trips to check on the beer. They dove down to the boat to ensure the barrels were still holding strong against the ocean pressure. They made their final check on January 19th, 2021, and then made the final plans to bring the barrels back to the surface on February 23rd, 2021. But that wasn't to be. When the brewers and divers returned to the chronometer on February 23rd, they couldn't believe their eyes. All the barrels were gone. All they found were some cut ropes. Sometime in the previous 35 days, a rogue group of divers or beer enthusiasts or general mischief makers dove to the bottom of the ocean, cut the barrels loose, and swam them back to the surface one at a time. Then, most likely, they loaded them up onto a boat and drove away with their spoils. The brewers were heartbroken when they discovered the loss. Carlos, the man with the dream himself, said, quote, "I started crying. 3 or 4 people without morals destroyed the work of so many people who put in so much effort," end quote. They asked prosecutors to open a criminal investigation, though they had absolutely no idea who would do such a thing. Police didn't and don't really have any leads or even ideas about who may have done the crime. They did surmise that because of the depth at which the beer was stored, scuba gear was needed, but the chronometer wreck is a popular dive site. Most likely, the criminals just stumbled upon the kegs attached to the boat and decided to come back with a boat of their own. If that's the case, then they were probably sorely disappointed, as beer inside the barrels was going to be mixed, remember, with another beer, and it hadn't finished aging, presumably. So it was probably pretty undrinkable. As Juan Pablo would say, quote, "If they stole it for their own consumption, they're going to have to throw it away. It was a lukewarm, gasless liquor that would be very difficult to drink," end quote. It is also true that police were unable to rule out the possibility that it was an act of sabotage, maybe by another brewery. Carlos thinks that's what happened, saying, quote, "I think they broke everything so the barrels would drift away. It was malice for malice's sake," end quote. If that's what happened, it's possible they just cut the barrels free and they're now floating somewhere in the ocean and may float up on some random beach like a boozy letter in a bottle someday. The case remains unsolved. The 3 breweries do plan to work with Carlos and his diving school again to attempt another ocean floor aged brew, but they are looking for a less popular location to store the goods. I think they're also trying to figure out how to make things a bit more secure. In the meantime, they did release the beer that hadn't been dropped to the bottom of the sea, a brew that has been described as dark brown to black, smelling like an alcohol bomb ready to explode, with notes of toasted caramel, coffee beans, cocoa, raisins, and liquor. And once drank, it, quote, "slaps you without asking permission," end quote. They call it chronometer. Thanks for hanging out with me. I hope those dudes don't give up and give the underwater beer another try. I don't like beer, as evidenced by the fact that even on a beer-centric episode, I avoid it like the plague, but I wouldn't mind trying a once-in-a-lifetime ocean bottom brew. Probably just a sip, though. Speaking of sipping, next week you will need to buy a sherry if you decide to drink alongside me. But because it's in a cocktail, you can get the cheap stuff. That's actually a general rule around here. Get the cheap stuff. Yeah, for sure, it does make a difference, I know. But we're mostly mixing every alcohol here with sweetness, so that hides a lot of the cheapness. The sweetness hides the cheapness. I'll see you next week, and remember, there are always alternatives to stealing somebody's ocean beer.